Welcome, friends. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever in the world you might be. Welcome back to RAYfest, the second day of our first online festival celebrating Women of Spirit. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Fatima Ashraf, and together with Saima Dyer, we are the co-creators of Ray of God. Ray seeks to share feminine spiritual wisdom to help realize God in all ways and to align with justice, truth, and beauty. The energetic state of the feminine is our guiding principle and holds our intention. And we believe that all genders hold the feminine and masculine within themselves. While we are women-led and women-centered, we welcome and encourage all genders to join us in a safe, inclusive space. We don't seek to present a voice of expertise. We see ourselves as travelers along the way and, God willing, learning with each step. Our ideas are constantly evolving, and we hope you will join us on this journey. The aim of this festival is to heal, harmonize, and challenge, and our contributors will be speaking to the broad theme of her space. This is how women create and claim or reclaim sacred and other spaces, both literally and through reshaping narratives and giving voice to their views and experience as they discover their power and agency as women. We have been blessed to be welcoming over the course of this weekend a truly diverse, intergenerational, interspiritual cohort of incredible contributors. Some of these are religious leaders, some spiritual teachers, activists, academics, creatives, and so much more. This weekend is marked by the full blue moon, which we enjoyed yesterday, All Hallows Eve, All Saints Eve, and Samhain, the midway point between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. This is a time to honor the saints, and we're just very conscious that this weekend there are many friends around the world who are in ceremony and prayer at the same time that we are here consciously gathering to celebrate women of spirit. So, with all of that said, thank you for your patience, those who've been with us over the course of the weekend and have heard this introduction a few times, but I think never any harm in hearing it again. Let me now introduce you to our spiriting sheroes, who we are going to have the pleasure of hearing from this morning. And let me begin by introducing all three of them to you, and then we'll begin with the questions. Let's begin with Leyla Jagiella. She is a cultural anthropologist and a research assistant in studies of religion at the Chair for Contemporary Cultures of Islam at Beirut University in Germany. She is also a chairperson of the LibEV, and I will not pronounce this correctly, but I will try, Liberal Islamischer Bund, an organization of progressive and inclusive Muslims of Germany. She is a fellow of the Muslim Institute in London and a member of the Global Queer Muslim Network. Her academic work focuses on questions of orthodoxy and heterodoxy in the Islamic discourses of South and Southeast Asia, as well as on the representation of gender and sexuality within these discourses. She has been an activist in the fields of progressive and inclusive Islam for the past few years and has held workshops on feminist and trans-inclusive approaches to Islam in Germany, the United Kingdom, South Africa, and Pakistan. She's currently working on a book, but maybe she will tell us a little bit about that later. Thank you, Leyla, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. And then we have Rabbi Robyn Ashworth-Steen, who is one of the rabbis at Manchester Reform Synagogue. She studied at Newnham College, Cambridge, for a degree in Theology Religious Studies. After graduating, Robyn worked as a solicitor at a human rights firm in London. Robyn is a passionate social justice activist and a co-founder of Tzelem, the Rabbinic Call for Social and Economic Justice in the UK, co-chair of the Greater Manchester Citizens, a broad-based community organising movement, and a chaplain of the One Love team for the universities. Robyn is interested in creating relational, textured activist communities. She is active on Twitter and her handle is Rabbi Robyn. Welcome, Robyn. It's so good to have you. And we have Ruth Liddle, who is one of the coordinating team at Inner Space Meditation and Personal Development Centre in Manchester, UK. She has been a meditation student and teacher with the Brahma Kumaris since 1995. Her background is in education, and she has more than 20 years professional experience teaching in schools and universities in UK, Singapore, Malaysia, and South Korea. Her passion is creative learning and sharing practical tips and tools to lead a happier, more peaceful life. As a volunteer with Living Values Education, Ruth led experiential trainings and seminars for parents, caregivers, and educators in Australia, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, South Korea, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam to promote the development of values-based learning communities. And you can find Inner Space on both facebook.com and twitter.com. For Facebook, it's Inner Space Manchester. And on Twitter, the handle is Inner Space MCR. So welcome, Ruth. Welcome to all three of our speakers. And just a little reminder to our speakers, I will be asking all three of you the same questions. And for each question, you have 5 minutes in which to respond. I have made this very helpful, I don't know what to call it, notifier. It took me so much effort. And I will notify you at 4 minutes and 5 minutes. And hopefully, I would try to be both massively present to everything you're saying and to the time. Sometimes I might be so immersed in what you're saying, this might fail a little bit, but we'll do our best. But so let's begin with our questions. And let's begin with Robyn. But this question is for all three of you. How do you each personally relate to the divine feminine from within your respective religious traditions? You may also, of course, say if you draw inspiration about the divine feminine from traditions other than your own. So Robyn, please begin.
Thanks, Fatima, and a warm good morning to you all. It's really beautiful to be here, and thank you for inviting me along, Fatima and Saima. And the preparation and the intention set is just really beautiful, and I'm enjoying and feeling grounded already. So the question about being personally related to the divine feminine is it's a long journey for me in a process of discovery that I'm still on and feel that I'm still on. And I would say really my first encounters with what we understand as divine feminine in Judaism was really through my teachers, through the elders in my life, in education, in my legal career as a lawyer before I was a rabbi, but mostly at seminary, my 5 years of training to be a rabbi. Rabbi Sheila Shulman, Zichronah Livracha, who passed away about 6 years ago, was my teacher, and she came along with high expectations of her students, a lot of anger at the world, the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, and a whole host of books behind her. And it was really in that I saw something of the divine feminine in relationship to her. And Sheila would always teach that it's in relationship that divinity is, very Martin Buber, but really that we understand ourselves through the we. I felt that meeting Sheila and being taught by her put me in firmly to a tradition that I was part of, stretching back thousands of years. Sheila, I'm wearing a hedgehog because Sheila would always say she had a hedgehogish preoccupation, and the two it's very hard to say, hedgehoggish preoccupations were that the I was realized through the we, and that the we was only possible through lots of I's, really understanding us to be inherently relational, which really speaks to me about the divine feminine, that it's all about collectivity, collaboration, and being together, and not power over, but power with. She also spoke about the struggle of being human and trying to reach for a world that is better than it is, a world that it should be, reaching for that and struggling together with the we. And she would always say that's the we is marginalized, disaffected people coming together for justice. So the divine feminine through Sheila was angry, relational, and strong and angry. And that was something that I hadn't allowed myself to be connected with, really. And I think, really, if I'm honest, it was only when I became a rabbi in Manchester 3 years ago, being the first female rabbi in Manchester, that I really understood my gender in a different way. And I discovered gender within my Judaism more as well. It's the work that I'm sure a lot of you know by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, the Women Who Run with Wolves, and the work of Rabbi Jill Hammer, who you're going to see in the next panel, from the Kehenet, the Jewish priestess movement in the UK. And when we were talking, Saima and Fatima and I just kept reaching, because the books are always like either side of me, because they really spoke to me about my deeper connection in Judaism. One of the feminine kind of energies or aspects of God is Shekhinah, which is divine presence of God, kind of resting above us, going into exile with us and comforting us in exile. Exile is something that I really understand historically as a Jewish person, and just a person in this world being exiled from myself and the world around me. So these books helped me with a deeper connection with this understanding of Shekhinah, the divine presence of God. And particularly the aspect that I see as being the divine feminine within me, which is my wild side. That's how I understand what the divine feminine is at the moment. I'm sure it'll change over time, but that's what I need at the moment. It manifests in the wild. And that's why I placed myself outside a garden. When I was at Rabbinic College, I remember crying with one of my colleagues, saying, I don't know who I am. And he led me in a meditation and said, where are you? I said, I'm in a walled garden. Everything's very pretty. It's very pristine. There's huge walls and I don't know how to get out. And it's too calm. It's unnerving. And I have to keep everything perfect. And that really says a lot about me. You can unearth what you want with that image. And he helped me lead into a meditation about being in a wild field. And that's often where I try to take myself, breaking out of the walled garden, that wild, terrifying expanse that really scares me. It feels like me accessing my wild and my divine feminine is a job that a path that I'm on, probably will be for the rest of my life, really. I don't know if you know the writings of Sue Monk Kidd. I only came across it through Brené Brown, the American scholar. And there's a prayer that Sue Monk Kidd writes in one of her books that begins, bless the largeness within me. And when I read that, it floored me. I thought, what? I've been running from the largeness for the entirety of my life, like bodily, with my voice, in every single way, like me stepping into my power. And I know we're going to come back to power, terrifies me. And I found that so revolutionary. Bless the largeness within me. So through the divine feminine, I try and break out of the boxes of the binary. I try and understand the world through fluidity and through questioning, through relationships and collectivity, through encounters with others, which really I think is very countercultural to the patriarchal system we live in. So I can see my 5 minutes is up, so I'll pause there. Thanks, Fatima.
Thank you, Robyn. So many riches there already. Leyla, would you please go next?
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you very much for having me here. It's really, really wonderful, and especially with such wonderful co-panelists. I'm already enjoying it a lot. I mostly in my own tradition, in the Muslim tradition, I mostly relate to the divine feminine through human beings, actually through women who have had an important role in our traditions. I draw a lot from Shia Islam and from Sufi Islam as well. And of course, we have a lot of very important women in both of these traditions. We have Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. We have Zainab, the daughter of Fatima. We have Sakina, the daughter of Hussein. And you might notice the name Sakina is actually the Arabic equivalent of the Shekhinah that Robyn just mentioned. These women play an important role in Shia tradition in particular, and also are revered very highly in Sufi traditions. They are very essential for the passing on of traditions. As such, Zainab is the main witness of the tragedy of Karbala, for example, which plays a central role in my faith. And without her, we wouldn't know much about the happenings of that tragic day. And there are numerous female Sufi saints as well. Rabia, many of you probably know about her, was a very important Sufi saint of early Islam. There was somebody called Fatima Sam in India. And it's told about Fatima Sam that some people at her time wondered, why is a woman supposed to be so revered in our tradition? Why should we follow a woman? Why should we listen to a woman? And a famous male saint of the time, Nizamuddin Aulia, replied to that, well, if you are in a forest and you suddenly have a lion or a tiger, in front of you, you don't ask whether it's female or male, So Nizamuddin Aulia said, okay, this woman has power. Why do you even care whether it's a woman or a man? These women play a very big role for me, and I identify with their struggles. I take a lot of inspiration from the traditions that they related to us. There's the mythical figure of Leyla, of course, in Sufi poetry. It's a romantic epic, actually similar to Romeo and Juliet. We have Leyla and Majnun, and I chose the name Leyla because I identified with that story to some extent, but also with the meaning of that name, the relevance that it has gained in Sufi poetry, because in Sufi poetry, Leyla is often used actually as a symbol for the feminine divine. Interestingly, we have a discussion in Islam, especially in the Sufi tradition, whether we should refer, or whether we could refer to God as she as well, and not just as he. Some big Sufi saints like Ibn Arabi have said, yes, you can call God she as well. There is that discourse. Somehow I personally don't do that. I cannot explain why. It's just not, I need that binary, I think, when I relate directly to God, when I speak to God. But I acknowledge that our image of God has a very feminine quality as well. So there are, for example, the names of Rahman and Rahim, the merciful, the compassionate, and our tradition says that this name actually relates to Rahim, to the Arabic word of the female womb. And somehow, for some strange reason, I very much relate to the Hindu goddess Kali as well. I do not relate too much to Hinduism as such. I don't engage much in syncretism or something like that. But this image, for some reason, it speaks a lot to me, and I find that it expresses something that we have in Islam as well when we think about God. There's this darkness in some way, the unknown. There's the motherly quality which God has, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. There's also this strength, this power, and all of that very much it feels like the essence of the divine feminine to me, and it connects very well to Allah, actually. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect timing, Leyla. Thank you. Thank you for that. More riches. Thank you. Ruth? Be lovely to hear from you.
Thank you. And before I share, I would just like to say how nourishing I found yesterday. And in deciding how to share and what to share today, I was asking for guidance this morning. And it came in quite an interesting way. We talked some weeks ago about sharing a picture of Lakshmi and Narayan. Brahma Kumaris isn't a Hindu organization, but it draws on the symbolism of the stories, the myths. And in fact, in the morning class that we had today, because we regularly study a piece of what we feel is spiritual truth in order to grasp the depth of truth and connect to God more accurately, more purposefully, and with more love. And so I would like to share this slide with you. Please know that it is a symbol, and I'll explain a little about it. Oh. Something happened there. I'll just try again. Sorry. Okay, this time. So this is a picture of Lakshmi and Narayan. Narayan on the left, actually, Lakshmi on the right. And this is a symbol of the energy of the divine feminine in balance with the energy of the divine masculine. And we would say that the source, the supreme, the almighty, the one, has a perfect balance of both of those energies. I do, you do, we all do. And the concept of the perfect, complete self is fundamental to our spiritual effort in the Brahma Kumaris. Our experience is that as we peel away the layers or veils of illusion, we will uncover the authentic self, the divine, the pure, the innocent, the loving self, which is equal to the source, the almighty. And when we return to that energy, return to that truth, and bring that energy into our day-to-day relationships, our roles and responsibilities, then we will experience complete contentment. Our energy will be benevolent. The world will benefit from our presence, and there will be mercy, the compassion, I think it's the Rahim, that in Hinduism there's Rahim Dil, the merciful heart. And this is the power. This is the power of the divine feminine. We can experience it in ourselves, we can experience it in the divine, and the combination, the yoga, the connection of the self in its pure consciousness and the almighty is what will raise my vibrational rate, raise me back up to my highest self, which can, in fact, be equal to that of the one. So what the process is, in 1 minute, what the process is moving back to the seed, to the essence, to the authentic power, the innocence, the pure joy, the peace, the love. And I had to peel away the veils of the modern woman, the traditional woman, to reach my call, and then live it. I have another image that maybe I can share later, because that is the image of the complete form. Perhaps I'll just flash it now. This is a symbol of the perfect energy of the supreme, the divine, the one in human form, but it would not have four arms. 2 are of the feminine, 2 are of the masculine. Spinning the discus of self-realization of knowledge, complete in knowledge. Power, purity, and service of the world. I'll stop. 5 minutes goes really quickly. Thank you.
Yes, yes, Ruth. We're realizing actually that 5 minutes does go very quickly, and we're feeling quite mean to all of our participants, you know, having them under this pressure. So we will definitely reconsider that for future festivals. But I think that's been wonderful from the three of you. We've had something of your journey, something of the different aspects of the divine, and your journeys with that. So it's laid a beautiful round for us to see what else might be now added in. So we'll move to our second question, and maybe because we're with you, Ruth, now, maybe you could answer this question first. It seems that an important part of our journey as women is to speak with our own voice from our own experience and to be heard. It would be good to hear your feelings about this and your experiences in discovering or working with your voice. Thank you.
Okay, well, you are seeing a soul in a black body that grew up very confused. Mother was white English nurse, father Nigerian medical student and doctor, and I was a big surprise to my mother's sheep farming family in Yorkshire. The intention of my mother was to go down south, get a job, have the baby, have it adopted, and go back as if nothing had happened, because in 1958, this is what happened. But in the course of the pregnancy, she decided to keep me, which meant she was on her own. Eventually, at age 3 to 4, we went to live with her mother and family, which was very confusing. So I grew up taking on voices from people around me, trying to work out how I should be, what I should be thinking. I was frequently told what I was not supposed to do to fit in, and so very confused. I had a brief experience of finding my voice in Christianity through people, Christian colleagues of my mother, well, Christian nurse John and his wife. They were beautiful. And I wanted that feeling. I loved the community, the belonging of the church, but I couldn't convert. I was afraid of God, those two things. And so I drifted off and avoided God's wrath. And I didn't find my voice, but I found something in teaching that resonated with my heart and values. I loved values. I loved empowering children and sending them on their way greater than I felt I could ever be. And so I found myself in teaching and working in the American school system in Singapore, where there are a lot of affirmations, there's a lot of praise used that I had never experienced. I suddenly started seeing that actually I was okay. And so I could speak with a little more authority, and I started exploring. And when I went to Malaysia, I came across the Brahma Kumaris, a spiritual organization, and very successful in Malaysia because we don't convert. As you know, Malaysia is an Islamic country, and 40 centers in Malaysia. And I did the Raj Yoga course, and I suddenly realized why I couldn't speak, and I didn't know myself. I hadn't realized I was a soul, and that the body and all the baggage that came with the body was not me. And so I was able to detach from that and hear from God's vision of me. And when I started to accept that, it opened my heart to love. A process, a journey, and it's still ongoing. And so my voice now comes from speaking truth as I experience it. And I hear that in the voices of people in this forum. And it's beautiful. And I hear God speaking through all of us. And that's the magic. It's women, the feminine energy coming together. And, oh, 1 minute. So I have found my voice, but it shakes from time to time with emotion because I still haven't cleaned my heart. I haven't cleaned the intellect. The third eye isn't seeing clearly, but I'm a work in process. And when I find my voice, my real voice, it will be a voice that harmonizes with the voices of the truth of all religions and none. And when we sing together, we'll change the world. This is the Shakti, the empowered feminine voice. Quiet, yet strong and resonant. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ruth. You know, when you said those words that, you know, what you'd heard in this forum was the truth, you know, being spoken by these women, it just really touched me so deeply. Really touched my heart. Thank you. Leyla, could you go next, please? And then Robyn.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My voice is definitely also shaking with emotion right now, and we can continue with the theme of growing up confused. Actually, I'm a transgender woman, and I grew up in a very small town in Germany, in an immigrant family. And I had these gender issues right from, you know, my first memories, that, you know, the world around me said you are a boy, but I didn't feel that I was a boy. I wasn't comfortable at all with that thought. My family is of Eastern European immigrant background, and there are some Muslim connections in my family history, but I didn't grow up as Muslim, but I very early identified as a Muslim as a child already. And then also, I mean, I was always very interested in religion for many different reasons, but certainly also because I understood life as such a confused thing, and I had so many questions about why I am here and why am I the way I am and nobody else is. I literally was the only person that I knew that way in my little small town. And yeah, and so I became very, very pious actually as a teenager, and went to the mosque very regularly. But then, of course, that mosque was a very segregated space, gender segregated space. I was supposed to go to the male section all the time, which just, you know, it just exacerbated my struggle. And of course, as a teenager, you go through all these changes in your body, your hormonal life starts to go wild and all of that. So that was a very confusing time, and my mosque didn't really offer me any comfort there. You know, I wasn't supposed to be in contact with women. I wasn't supposed to be a woman. I wasn't supposed to be feminine. And that was a very, very tough time, actually. It was a big, big struggle. There's a lot to tell on enough for that. But eventually I started to do my own research. I wanted to know, is that really all we have in our tradition? And I somehow, when I was 20 years old, I ended up deciding that I would transition, that I would live as a woman from now on. And also I went to India and later to Pakistan, where I lived for quite a while. And I started to live with the South Asian transgender community, which has an old history and which is very established traditionally in the spiritual life of Islam in South Asia, and which actually understands itself as fulfilling a spiritual role. You know, the traditional transgender community in South Asia is seen as people of power, of a special special closeness to God and the prophet. And that empowered me. I came back from that experience to Europe, and I had a totally different feeling of a totally different experience of myself. I'm trying to share that experience now in workshops and talks and articles that I write. You mentioned that I'm writing a book right now. I'm still a bit hesitant to say too much about it because I'm in a very crucial anything right now, but different experiences of both being a woman and both being transgender, and we need to make these different cultural traditions and different cultural interpretations of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be transgender visible. And that's what I'm trying to do. That is the voice that I have and that I want to make audible. Speaking of audible, I just received a message that apparently my connection is not too well. I'm very sorry. I hope you all got the gist of it. And let's pray that, well, for the rest of this discussion, it will be fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Leyla. No, we definitely, it was just a little moment there that it sort of seemed to freeze, but we seem to have got it. And yes, God willing, for the rest of this session, we'll have you super clearly. Thank you so much for sharing that, Leyla. You know, I think to be reminded that the transgender community in South Asia were just seen in such a different way. You know, it's just, for many of us, it's a, you know, for many of us from that part of the world, it's a really helpful reminder as well. You know, just seeing how they may now be being treated, which can often be so different from the status and position that they held. So yes, I can imagine how affirming that experience, though still very challenging, may have been for you. But thank you so much for sharing it. I know how deeply personal these things are. Thank you. Robyn, over to you.
Thanks. And it's a real privilege to stand alongside you both in sharing your personal stories and all of us responding in our personal ways. And it reminds me of the writings of Adrian Rich, the poet and scholar, who said the personal is political. So, you know, these stories start with the personal because they influence the world around us. So I'll do the same. And I'm actually going to start with my birth story, and something that I've been returning to very recently, this kind of like my own mythic creation story that my book opens at. In the Torah, in our 5 books of Moses, we start with Bereshit in the beginning. So in my beginning, I was late in coming, 10 days late, and they took me into hospital to induce me. But the consultant, male consultant in those days, had to get home by 5 o'clock. So my mum said that the birth was a violent and a quick one, because the consultant said, she has to come now, I need to go. I was so emotional even speaking about this. And then I was in those days in that particular hospital, for some reason, babies were taken away from their mums for the night. And I was taken away, and my mum was super emotional. She's an emotional being anyway, as some people here know. And she was really, it was devastating. And my parents say that as a child, as a baby, I was difficult. I cried a lot. I found change hard. And then as a toddler onwards, I was utterly compliant. And that really is my journey. And my journey has been about trying not to be compliant and not understanding the world as my role in it being perfect and good and quiet and silent and fitting in. Cambridge was an experience that didn't particularly help me on my way. Studying theology at Cambridge was a very objective exercise. We were kind of taught that you were separate from your religious texts, and you could look at them objectively, which of course is a farce. I only realised later on, when I got taught at college with critical thinking as a rabbi, that of course that's not how the world works. Audre Lorde, the really powerful scholar, writes that we're kind of given this myth by the patriarchy, which we all suffer in, that I think, therefore I am, that it's all about the intellect, it's about what we achieve and what we know. And Audre Lorde offers the phrase, and I was like bowled over by it, I feel, therefore I am. And like the liberation that gave me of like finding myself in my body and also my feelings and my voice was all part of that. as a child growing up, or even a young adult, I kept saying to people, and when I went out to therapy for the first time, I don't feel anger. Like, I don't get anger. It's just not, I don't have that emotion, which of course was like rubbish. But it was just my way of understanding the world, that like anger wasn't available to me. Like having a loud voice, not mine. I was in Rabbinic College, and we were in a class that was terrible. Awful. The teacher hadn't prepared. It was really not clear what was happening, and I switched off. And one of my friends, Daniel, put his hand in, he said, "Excuse me, I'm finding this really frustrating. Can you explain what the structure of the class is?" And he kind of, questioned the teacher. And I was so blown away, because I didn't realize I was in a box. I didn't realize I could step out of it, and I didn't realize I had a voice, that I could question it. And that was really my beginning. Late into my adulthood, I was 30, I think 29 when I started the course, of like, oh, I actually can question. I can question authority. I don't have to be on that term, and it's a powerful, beautiful thing. And Fatima and Saima and I, when we were talking in the prep, I was talking about a voice coach that I've started working with. Happens to be my mother-in-law. I'm really blessed to have an amazing mother-in-law. She's a professor of voice coaching, and she really encourages through the practice she has of, like this, we talk about shaking voice. She's like, actually, it's the cracks that we need to hear. It's about not kind of retreating from the cracks in your voice, but going for it. And it's that kind of wildness, that ugliness, that not perfectness. I'm a massive perfectionist, which, I think is part of being trained to be powerless as a woman, partly. And about like, what is that shaking and that crackling? That's where the beauty is, and that's where the openings are. And that's why the figure of Baba Yaga, the ferocious kind of folk mythic creature, sometimes has chicken legs and quite deformed and ferocious looking old woman, has become my woman. That is what I want to be. And in Torah, we have an awful tradition in our teachings that women often in rabbinic literature are said to be beautiful. They're great to look at. They're beautiful and well formed, objectifying as well. I don't want to be that. I want to be the ferocious, angry woman of my teacher, Rabbi Sheila Shulman was one of them. Not that she wasn't beautiful, but that the wildness is okay and it's needed. So I feel that I'm getting it right. And in my job, when people say to me, "Robyn, you're being selfish, you're being ambitious," don't worry, trust me, I've got this. You don't need to worry, calm down. When people say that to me, I know I've got it right, and that I'm changing the way that I'm being in the world and using my voice correctly. But what I do know is to hold the energy that takes, the constant fighting of me having to put myself into those spaces, and to have to fight for, in rabbinic world, it can be like you're kind of 24/7 expected to work. So finding rest and well-being within that, people find confusing, and it's a fight. So what I know I need is a space to take it all. I need collective spaces. In Judaism, we have something called chevrutot, which are learning partners. I have spaces where I can go, I can talk, I have therapy. It takes an awful lot for me to be able to go into the world and do what feels instinctively and intuitively wrong for me in my body and in my emotions as well. And just to end with Clarissa Pinkola Estes' word says that if you don't do that work, to go to sleep now, so to turn away from that work, is certain death. So I think that for me, that work of finding my voice, that's life, and without it, parts of me die. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Robyn. The cracks. I got a lovely little message from Saima saying, louder. So I'm going to try and speak louder. It's the divine, everything coming together for each of us in the proportion that we need. Thank you. So Robyn, perhaps you can then lead on the final question, and then Leyla, and back to Ruth. We have heard many people say, that is Saima and I, that it's the time of the feminine, and maybe you've heard that said too, and that it's a time for female leadership to come to the fore. How do you feel about this? How does it speak to your experience and understanding?
Thanks. Yeah, I definitely think it's the time of the feminine. I think we're in it and we're stepping into it. And from my position of being in a rabbi, which is like quite an institutional, established role, although doing it in the way that I'm doing it, where I'm doing it isn't particularly. But being a rabbi is so dangerous, and I think it's quite symbolic of some of the issues of the systems of leadership that we have and have inherited as well. Being a rabbi, and again, I'm using that as a symbol, but this is just my framework, is so shiny and so easy to misuse. And I see it all the time. It's very hard for rabbis to, and I count myself in this because I inherit the system that I'm in, and I have the title. It's hard to step back and let other people in. It's very easy to see yourself as being a sage on the stage, leading from the front and power over. Like that is what you're expected to step into. It's how the role is set up. It's how the world is set up, you know, and especially if you fit the mold of being probably like white, straight, male, you like, that's it, you're in it and you have the thing. And if you're not in that, it's very hard, but you have to fit into that model somehow. So it takes all of my energy to refocus it. And they're amazing, just very clearly to say it's not about women and men. We've spoken about feminine and masculine energies, and it's about systems that have been set up. So it's not about whether it's a man or a woman, but it takes all my focus, as it does with my other rabbis who are trying to find a different way forward, different way of leadership, to reground and work forward, be a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. I always like that saying. And it's very clearly about the role that I'm in is not serving my needs, it's serving the needs of others whilst respecting my needs. It's a mutual relationship. I know that if I stay in the leadership role of serving others, that I end up being burnt out, I get exhausted, and all my codependency is like triggered. My therapist talks about the Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz, and about how Dorothy gives all of her power away to the Wizard of Oz. And it's only at the end when she reveals the curtain and opens and sees a frail man sitting there that she realizes she's given all her power away. And actually the power was within to begin with. I find that so powerful. I know that if I lead in a way that is this system that I've inherited, I feel like a dancing bear sometimes being prodded and bits taken away from me. Whereas if I'm in my power, it feels very different. I also know that I need others. That it's not about me, I'm not indispensable, and it's the weight of the world. I have to remind myself, even saying it's hard, the weight of the world is not on my shoulders alone, it's about a collectivity. So Adrian Rich adds a bit into a beautiful saying we have in Judaism by Hillel, who was a contemporary of Jesus: if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? So like looking after myself first is incredibly important. If I'm only for myself, what am I? That we look after ourselves and then go out and, you know, create justice. If not now, when? Like the work is urgent. And Adrian Rich and Rabbi Sheila taught it me, said, if not with others, how? If you're not with other people doing it, that's the process. It has to be collective. I also think that what spiritual female leadership looks like is vulnerability. And I'm really behind Brené Brown and her work from the States about leading with vulnerability and emotion. Being able to be personal, trying not to, and you said that in the beginning, Fatima, about, you know, not saying that we're experts. It's about learning, it's about making mistakes, it's about being together rather than having all the answers and knowing it. That's quite scary for me because I'm brought up in a very strict academic way that, you know, the more you know, the better you are and the safer you'll be, which of course is a fallacy, but I have that all the time. And Brené Brown teaches me as a leader about the importance of boundaries and courage, of having hard conversations. And she has a line that completely blew me away when I read it. She says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And what that debunked from me was this idea that I can't be honest about anything, or I have to kind of hide what I think won't be pleasant for the other to hear, that I need to kind of keep it to myself. And actually being clear and having honest, hard conversations, setting boundaries is the kindest thing to do. It's not a binary either. I think the last thing I'll say is that Rabbi Larry Hoffman teaches, again, rabbi as a symbol, that rabbis are artists. And I love that idea of like leaders. Leading really is an art form. It's something that we get to play with. And we're kind of vessels for something rather than holding the keys to it. And my Chavruta, one of my Chavruta partners, Rabbi Daniel, says that being a rabbi is a garment, that we all have like our very deep ways of longing and principles and values and feelings And we find different garments that work at different moments to help express that in the world. And if I remember that, then I don't get sucked in by the title or the position or the authority, which is so shiny and tantalizing. But I just remember that it's a garment I get to put on. And I have other garments I put on, like I'm a mother. That can be a way of me expressing certain things about myself that are very deep. Whatever it is, I get to express it in that way. So I think things are changing, and in my community, things have really changed. The revolution of Zoom, albeit it's only, it's not the real thing, but I feel like things have been broken open recently and broken through. And I'm quite excited about what is next.
Thank you, Robyn. Leyla?
Yeah, I was so lost now. I mean, so attentively listening to Robyn that I almost forgot what the question actually was. But now it came back. No, it came back to me. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I had to think for a moment. Yeah, I would say, when was it not the time for the feminine? It has always been the time for the feminine, but I feel like in human history there are these cycles, and there are these moments when suddenly the feminine becomes more present and more visible. We had that in the past as well, when I talked about these important female figures in Islamic history that matter so much to me. Those were moments in history when women were very audible, when they made their voice in very critical situations, very essential voices. Fatima, who after the death of the Prophet fought for her inheritance, insisted on it, while others actually did not want her to inherit. There are different historical narratives on this. Some say she was right, some say she was wrong, but the essential point is there was a woman who fought for her inheritance, for her right, and she did not let men tell her what their opinion was on that. Zainab, who, as I said, was the sole witness of the tragedy of Karbala, and who stood in the court of the governor who was responsible for that tragedy, in which the grandson of the Prophet was murdered and his companions were murdered, and she stood there in front of the governor and spoke against that. Those were very, very strong female voices at that time, and we remember them even now, so many centuries afterwards. We still remember their words. So they made a huge impact. Of course, we live in very special times now, in which Robyn just mentioned Zoom, and of course the online world in particular offers us so many more possibilities to develop a collective female voice or collective feminine voice. And I mean, I just mentioned in my personal story that, I was this teenager in this little mosque in Germany, and the mosque offered me nothing, and I did my own research. And that was only possible because suddenly the internet was there. I still grew up without the internet, and then in the 90s it suddenly became a reality in our lives, and people like me, we could suddenly connect. I knew there were other queer Muslims, there were other trans Muslims. Suddenly we heard about people like Amina Wadud, who I think she will be in the next panel, if I'm correct, right? So, and I sat there in my little small town in Germany and was dealing with my little mosque, and suddenly I read about this woman, who called herself an imam, and the woman imam and all of that, and caused quite a scandal. And that was really, really, really a big thing, to hear about that. And since then, certainly so much has happened all over the world. Inclusive mosques have sprung up. Feminist Muslim activists have become very, very vocal. We have, my own organization actually always had a very strong female leadership. It's been, I'm actually not I'm not an active chair anymore. I'm still active, but not in that position. I gave it up a short while ago, but both before me and after me, the board of our organization, the Liberal Islamische Bund, has been dominated by women. And that is just amazing, you know, to have a Muslim organization in Germany whose leadership, whose board has always been dominated by women. So there is something happening there. And of course, we're living in very difficult times in which a lot of bad things also happen in the name of Islam. We've seen the rise of ISIS, of Daesh recently. We've seen just dance in Paris, frustrated about these negative developments in the Muslim world. But at the same time, I tell these young people, look, what happened just in the last 10 years or 20 years, the positive development and the increased presence of women is so amazing, and there is so much positive development that happened, and more is going to happen. I'm very sure about that.
Thank you, Leyla. Thank you. Ruth, over to you.
Thank you. Some people will know the Brahma Kumaris, means daughters of Brahma, and is traditionally led by women. And the founder, whose nickname was Brahma Baba, Father Brahma, he got a direct message to put women in front of the organization. And very early on, he had the financial, the money energy to make the organization work. But very early on, a committee of women was put in charge. Why? In the 30s in India, a time where Hindu women, Muslim women were covered, and a time where the spiritual leaders were traditionally men, maybe the message would have been lost if another man had stood up and said, this is what God has told me to say. Also, if a man had stood up and done that and caused the uproar in his community that Brahma Baba did, he'd probably have been killed. They sent an assassin to try and kill him as it was, because he'd upset the status quo, the traditional community turned against him. But more than that, what was seen to be needed was something to uplift the women. Brahma Baba had, before he became deeply involved spiritually, he had a picture of Lakshmi and Narayan, and Lakshmi was washing Narayan's feet. And he had it painted out. He said, this can't be right. You know, a goddess cannot wash the feet of a god. But so he always had that bhavana, that pure intention to uplift women. But the knowledge released women, it freed women. While outside, they were encouraged to carry on. This is a family path. It's a family path of belonging, of caring and loving and uplifting. While you're doing what you're doing, do it with love. Do it in connection with the divine. And free yourself from the thoughts about it. Become powerful and change the atmosphere in your home. Change the thinking of those who are oppressing you. And so that encouragement was there, and the women could quietly do it. They didn't need an education either. And what we saw over the years were even women that had not had a formal schooling, they grew to be great leaders. I mean, our late administrative head, Daddy Janki, she left the body age 104, and she hadn't had a formal education. But she sat alongside world leaders and they listened. I remember seeing the effect of the feminine energy actually in Malaysia when I went back because Daddy was visiting. And she sat on the stage with Dr. Mahathir and she told him off for being corrupt, like she was telling her baby brother off, you know? And she got away with it because her heart was pure, it was loving, it was for the benefit of society, for his own good. And when someone with that motherly love, that family love, who has no ego, no desire to prove themselves, when they give a message, then people can listen in a different way. And I think that's what's needed now. Not just the time of the feminine and feminine leadership, but empowered, connected with the source. If each one of us connects with our truth and lives it and speaks it, we will make a phenomenal difference in the world, because no one will feel threatened by it. This is what I believe. And traditionally, women are servant leaders. You know, the mother serves her family. Yeah. As educators, they're the first educator, with that vision of greatness for whoever is there. And where love is pure, where there's no attachment, and this is an area we have to work on, where there's no attachment, where it's unconditional. I will love your child as much as my child. And there will be a sense of family, like in some of the old communities where, you know, anyone would feed anyone's child. It was just like everyone was a mother, everyone was a big sister, everyone was a leader, everyone had the balance of love and law, the discipline that keeps people safe and guides them. So I think definitely I've seen it in action, not just with Daddy Janki, with many people, and I'm seeing it. And it's just very briefly, it's that feminine energy that will change aggression into assertiveness. And this is where I see people are going wrong in the world. If I can say things are going wrong, there's aggression and selfishness, there's impurity. So yeah, together we can make a difference.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, all three of you. You've just laid out such riches, and all I can think and wish is that I really want a really long conversation with all three of you sat in that beautiful walled garden behind Robin. But we still have some time for some questions and some more conversations. It's so difficult for me to fully do justice to each of your responses. There's so much you're sharing, and I don't want to reduce it. So please forgive me if my own responses are limited, but I am absorbing it all and it's all percolating. So thank you. But we do have some questions, and I'd like to begin with one from Dalia Latifa Noor. And Dalia, would you like to unmute yourself and say your question out loud, or would you like me to read it?
Sure, I don't mind asking.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you all. I feel really inspired and very moved by your vulnerability and your courage. So that's why I feel like I can ask the question that I'm asking, which is actually really hard for me to ask because my journey has been so, oh now I'm going to get emotional. My journey has been so steeped in sexual shame as a woman. And as someone whose mother had her genitals cut, and I have that in my ancestral line. And I feel that it's not something that comes up in conversations like this very boldly. Like, women's sexuality is still only allowed in certain parameters, and is shamed, and we carry so much shame. And I feel that somehow, unless we address this, the potential of awakening the feminine is not going to be realized in its full potential. And I don't know what the answer is, because I'm so steeped in it that it's been such a journey within myself as a single woman who's never been married, and just growing up in this, like, drowning in this sexual shame. You know, what role do our faith leaders have in helping to talk about this openly. And if you have any, anything to share on that, I would be really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalia. Would any of our speakers like to respond to that? Thank you, Robyn. Just so that I know, Ruth and Leyla, would you also like to respond?
I have something I can say, but I think it's more important if Robyn needs more time, let her have more time.
Okay, just checking that. Leyla, would you also like to respond to this?
A few words, maybe, yeah.
Okay. So we'll start with Robyn and then Ruth and then Leyla. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and keep it brief. When you wrote your question, I knew I was like, I have to hold myself back. And thank you for sharing and for the emotions that come up. And I think that talking about sex is exactly goes to the heart of the things that I was talking about. I also find it hard. So you said, as a single woman who's not been married, I've been married and with my partner since I was 20. Sexual shame is still a massive thing. Like, I don't know whether it matters whether you're in a relationship, it just follows us around wherever we go. Audre Lorde, and I'm so thankful for you for reminding me, because I go to her when I think about this stuff. Being wild and finding that within is all about passion and emotion and joy and fun and passion and joy and fun, something that's completely denied to us. And of course, that's what being sexual is all about, to be able to let go and be free. Audre Lorde is really beautiful, and I found it a very hard thing to read as well, because she talks about the erotic being used as power against and over so much. She talks, I've got my notes because I always have my notes of her at my side because I need it all the time. And she talks about like pornography, for example, being emphasizes sensation without feeling. So what the feminine does is try to bring, and what I try and do, but I'm still on such a journey with it, is sensation of the body with the feeling, so that it's not divorced, that it's not used, that sex isn't used objectively or without the feelings, that our bodies and our minds and our spirits are all connected in a very deep and beautiful way. And I think the way of sexual shame in warfare in different cultures is so huge, so profound, and such a gaping wound. And I feel it in my body. I can hear, in yours as well, like the woundedness that we carry. I feel it in terms of like eating as well, like pleasure, what's been done to me as a woman in terms of like being as small as I can, not allowing myself to eat and be nourished. That's part of the sexual experience. It's sensation, but without the feeling, denying all of that. So I'm really behind you in your fight to get those kind of conversations into these spaces, into all of them, and helping us to step into joy and passion. But I also hear like how hard that is, because such ingrained habits within us. So I'll stop there because I want to hear from Ruth and Leyla too. But thank you for opening that up. It's just a really wonderful, deep question.
Thank you. This whole idea of shame, I've just been a big bag of shame all my life for one reason or another. And one thing I've found helpful is it's a practice of just connecting with God, because God is the ocean of love. God sees me in my perfect form. God is the perfect mother, the perfect father, everything. And they wouldn't see. They would know, but they wouldn't see. So if I can view myself in that way, I found it very useful to see myself, know my history, know my story, and know it wasn't my fault. Whatever happened in the past, I didn't know what was going on. It was there for me to learn, but now I have an option. I can carry on holding the shame, or I can embrace it, accept it, and park it. And I've found if I've practiced this, I've understood that, shame is a feeling that I am bad. I've shifted from thinking, oh, I did something bad, to I am bad. And I'm not. This is the biggest illusion. So just to wash myself. And when my mind goes there, no, park it. That's all to do with the past. What can I do with now? What can I do to become so strong that I can help others raise them out of their shame? Not there yet. don't have to be, but sharing the message, encouraging, voicing it, but not indulging in it. I have had a habit of going into it and giving it life and energy, and that doesn't help me personally. So it's like, view it, deal with it, let it go, and create a habit of doing that. Sorry, I sound like a teacher, but I found it so helpful to me. Because I couldn't raise my head at one point. I couldn't look at people in the eyes because I felt so worthless, so evil, so bad. I thought I must be, to be going through this. And it's not that at all. I know now from what God has made me feel, what God has communicated with me. I gave you that role. You're in that body because you are strong enough to face what you need to face and to help others through it. So working in that way has helped me. I'd like to share that. Thank you.
I think, wow, I mean, that was very powerful. Thank you very much, Ruth, and also Robyn. That was wonderful. I obviously, my socialization as a transgender woman was a bit different in that regard, because the shame that I was taught was, it's connected to basically the not to my physical embodiment, but precisely the idea that I do not fit that kind of body. So it was more about my femininity and not so much about my genitals, for example. Nevertheless, I have learned so much shame, and it really astonishes me sometimes how it defines my reactions to negative experiences, and how much for example, I do make transphobic experiences quite regularly. And whenever something like that happens, I become petrified in shame. I cannot react, and it makes me angry that I cannot react, that I cannot be that strong woman in that moment, but I'm just feeling shame and I'm petrified. Also, when I'm sexually harassed, I feel shame and I'm petrified in that shame, and I cannot do anything. I cannot react, and then afterwards, of course, I think I should have done this, I should have done that. You should react this way, that way to the men who do that to you. But I just can't because this shame is so strong. But what I've experienced is that, just as Ruth says, with practice over the years, it becomes easier. And it's important to remind yourself of that these small steps matter, because we think that we have to be able to deal with this in an instant, and we have to fight this, and why can't we? But reality is that this is a long journey, and only now I'm 40 years old now, and now I can see the change that has happened in my life with how I deal with that change, after many decades. And it just stay committed to that, and connect to the resources we have in every faith tradition. There are sex positive messages. We have in Islam so many sex positive messages in our traditions, from Sufi teachers like Ibn Arabi, for example. There's so much. The problem is just simply that our traditional leaders don't expose us to that, but instead constantly feed that guilt and that shame. So we have to simply work against that. As much as they feed our brains and hearts with the negative stuff, we have to try feeding our brains and hearts with the positive stuff that is there. The treasure is there. It's all available to us. But we are not taught that it is there, and that is the biggest problem.
Thank you, Leyla. Thank you so much. Your sharings are really touching everybody. All of our participants, we're getting some really beautiful, positive feedback in the chat. Do have a look when you can, and I'm sure there's people that are touched that haven't articulated it. We're coming a little bit towards the end of our session, but we do have time for one last question. I'm just going to quickly scroll to the bottom, but I think it was posed quite early on. I just want to make sure I'm not Yes, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, just really positive feedback coming through. So we have time for one final question, and it's a question posed by Hannah. Hannah, would you like to unmute yourself and speak yourself, or would you like us to speak for you? Hannah? Okay, I'm not hearing from you, so I'm going to read this out for you.
Sorry, she's coming. I just need to, sorry, I need to.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all.
My fault.
No problem at all. Thank you, Simon.
Simon, thank you, Fatih, and thank you, all of you. I posed my question sort of before hearing your answers to Dahlia's, and so thank you, firstly, Dahlia, for asking such an important and question I think is meaningful to so many of us. And it's so interesting, sort of, I realised that all three of your responses sort of have opened up the question and responded to it in ways that sort of really expand it for me. So it's been partially answered, thank you. But I guess my question was initially sort of to Robyn, really. I thank you so much for your journey of a sort of a fellow recovering perfectionist speaks so deeply to mine. And I realised there was a typo that's a slight sort of a divine slip, where I said that I'm also an ambivalently recovering compliant perfectionist trying to be comfortable and discover the power of the cracks. And I meant to say to be comfortable with the cracks, but I think I realised that personally it's sort of being able to stay with the discomfort of moving beyond our kind of conditioned, socially sort of acceptable selves. That is such a challenge, and I really would love to hear sort of Robyn specifically, but actually all three speakers speak a bit more to discovering the wild side, entering that sort of what is a socialized discomfort and a very internal discomfort with being within that sort of wild feminine expanse, the messiness, the passion, the darkness, all of it.
Thank you, Hannah. So we have a few minutes. So I'm just going to, if we can try and share maybe in a minute each. I know it's harsh, I'm sorry. But Robyn, could you start, please?
Yeah, I'll just speak really quickly because there's so much to talk about, isn't there? And I would love to be in conversation here for more, but that's not for now, but later. For me, the quotation I have also by me, have lots of mantras to help me through the world. Depression is the reward for being good. So I really realised for me that death will come, inner death will come if I don't release the wild in me and if I go down the perfectionist path. So there's a quotation, a question that I bring to community quite a lot from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who says, "What must I give more death to today in order to generate more life? What must I give more death to today in order to generate life?" I'm realizing more and more the ways in which I die through my perfectionism. I'm not able to be in my creative world that gives me life, that connects me with the wild flowing river beneath everything. The more that I'm in my world garden, the sadder I get and the more I die. And the last thing that I'd say about the wild side for me, and my therapist gave me this image, which I love, is about a tapestry. And she says, if you look at the back of a tapestry, it's so messy. The world is messy, like this fallacy that the world is perfect and good, or should be, that life should be fair, and that it isn't all a struggle. It's just a myth we tell ourselves so that we keep reaching and climbing the ladder and the ladder. And someone said to me, if you actually realise that we're the ones holding up the ladder, like if we walk away from it, it will just fall. Actually, the world is about struggle, it's about beauty, it's about emotion and all of that. So the tapestry is about turning away from the beautiful front and realising the messiness behind it. And the challenge, I think, for me, and maybe for you as a recovering perfectionist, is not to get trapped in the messiness, in the threads, but actually to be able to step back and see the beauty in the messiness and the beauty of the picture as well. I threw a lot in there, but hopefully some of that stuck. Yeah.
Thank you, Robyn. If Ruth, you could go next, and then Leyla. Thank you, Robyn.
Very briefly, if I go through a moment of wildness, or, there's the attraction to go back to something like windsurfing or skiing, or, you know, when I'm living a spiritual life, I look at what are the unmet needs. There's something that's not satisfying me in terms of I'm not feeling loved, understood, respected, valued, safe. There's something, and I'm rebelling or something. And there's always a message there. And if it's not going to do anyone any harm, why not? But not to become dependent on it. To check the energy and do it with intention and for the better good. And why not be wild from time to time? Thank you.
It's really a tough question. I'm struggling with it myself. It's not easy. I think the first step is, of course, to overcome the negativity that keeps you from being wild. You know, the shame that Dalia already mentioned. And I always remind myself of the fact that even the most highly revered figures of our tradition struggled with that. I recently read a quote by Imam Ali, who's the husband of Fatima, actually, and he said, if you like yourself too much, then there's something wrong with your intelligence. And I read that and I thought, wow, that's such a call out to this constant positivity thinking, you know. And I thought, okay, if somebody like Imam Ali himself apparently experienced these kind of negative feelings, then why do I expect that I always have to overcome them? You know, it's sad that our prophet had doubts after his first revelation, and he even was close to suicide at some point. In the Quran, we read that Mary, when she's left, you know, everybody has left her because she has a child and there's no father, and she's alone and she's giving birth and suffering, and she says, oh, if I only was dead instead, you know. So she has suicidal thoughts. She's depressed. Maryam, you know. So I don't want to even have that high expectation that I have to overcome all of this in an instant. I try to embrace these feelings and say, okay, this is part of a human experience. And through that embrace, I then can get in touch with my strength. If I try to fight it, if I try to, you know, think that I should be over this, then I'm just struggling with it and not dealing with it. But you know, just accepting it, embracing it, and there is my strength, there is the wildness.
Thank you, Leyla, for those final words. What a beautiful, beautiful heart-to-heart conversation with you three wonderful women. Thank you so much for really giving us such an insight into your journeys, to your, you know, experiences, to your discoveries, you know, and letting us into those little vulnerabilities, the things that are not quite figured out. You've given us so much this morning, and this afternoon, and we are so grateful. And God willing, may this conversation, you know, I'm sure it will spill into the rest of the day for all of us, and may it generate beauty within us. Thank you so much. Words are not enough. Thank you so much.